Hey everyone, welcome back to the Daily Past. It's so good to have you here. So today we've got something pretty interesting to talk about. We're diving into India's latest shift in foreign policy, something that could change the way we think about the region, especially when it comes to Afghanistan. Yep, you guessed it, we're talking about India's growing engagement with the Taliban and how they've pledged significant humanitarian aid to Afghanistan after the Taliban made a formal request. Now, this is a pretty big deal for a few reasons. If you've been following the news for the last couple of years, you know that India, right after the Taliban took over in 2021, was super cautious. They kept their distance for a lot of reasons, mostly because of security concerns and the political situation. But things seem to be changing, and today we're going to unpack that. Let's break it all down and look at why this shift matters. We'll dive into the aid India's promised, the security concerns, and what might come next. So stick around. So the big moment. India and the Taliban held a high-level meeting in Dubai. Yeah, Dubai, on the 8th of January. This was the first serious engagement between the two sides since the Taliban's return to power in Afghanistan. And honestly, it's kind of fascinating because just a couple of years ago, India was very much on the sidelines when it came to the Taliban. They were concerned, understandably so, about Afghanistan's instability, about the Taliban's human rights record, and let's face it, about what this meant for regional security. But here's the thing. The situation in Afghanistan is dire. The country is going through one of the worst humanitarian crises in recent history. So even though India had kept its distance diplomatically, they couldn't ignore the suffering of the Afghan people forever. The Dubai meeting was a pretty clear sign that India is taking a more pragmatic approach now. And no, it's not about recognizing the Taliban as the legitimate government of Afghanistan. Not at all. India is still pretty cautious about that. But it does show that India is willing to engage where it matters on issues like humanitarian aid and regional security. So what was the meeting all about? Well, as we're about to see, it was about more than just words, it was about action. And what India is promising to do is pretty significant. Let's get into the heart of it, humanitarian aid. India has promised to send 50,000 metric tons of wheat to Afghanistan. That's a lot of wheat. I mean, it's enough to feed millions of people, especially with the winter months coming up. On top of that, India is sending $25 million worth of essential medicines. And that's huge, because Afghanistan's healthcare system has basically collapsed under the weight of years of conflict. They're short on everything from basic medications to medical staff. And let's not forget, the COVID-19 vaccines, 500,000 doses. Yeah, COVID is still a thing in some parts of the world, and Afghanistan's healthcare system is definitely not in a position to deal with a major surge in cases. So these vaccines will help, no doubt. But that's not all. India is also sending earthquake relief supplies. Afghanistan's been hit by some pretty devastating earthquakes in recent years, and let's be real, it's hard to recover when you're already facing so many other challenges. So these supplies are critical. It's not just food and medicine, it's everything needed to help a population that's been absolutely battered by crises. Getting all this aid to Afghanistan isn't easy though. The logistics are tricky. You've got mountains, remote areas, political instability, and don't forget the ongoing sanctions. But India's going to be using both air and sea routes to deliver the aid. And they're not doing this alone. They're coordinating with international organizations like the UN and the World Food Programme to make sure the aid actually reaches the people who need it most. So yeah, the aid is crucial, but it's not just a band-aid solution. India's approach here is part of a bigger strategy to keep Afghanistan stable, especially as the country faces multiple crises at once. Alright, now let's talk about the elephant in the room, security. While India's humanitarian aid is important, there's one thing that's always going to be at the top of India's mind when it comes to Afghanistan: terrorism. We all know that groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, two major terror organizations that have been responsible for deadly attacks in India, have used Afghan soil in the past. And that's something India is not going to ignore. So during the Dubai meeting, the Afghan Foreign Minister, Amir Khan Muttaqi, promised India that Afghanistan wouldn't be used as a launchpad for attacks against any other country, including India. That's a pretty bold claim. Now, it's one thing for the Taliban to say this, but India's not going to take them at face value. After all, India's been burned by terrorism before, and they'll be closely monitoring the situation. If there's even the slightest indication that Afghan territory is being used by terrorists to target India, well, that could change everything. It would affect any future engagements, and honestly probably make India rethink its entire strategy. So security is still a big concern. But for now, both sides have agreed on one thing: peace and stability in the region require cooperation. India will keep a close eye on things, and if the Taliban's serious about their promises, we could see more engagement down the road. Now let's talk about the future. Because this isn't just about providing immediate aid. India has a long-term strategy for Afghanistan, and it's all about stability and development. India's been involved in Afghanistan for over 2 decades, pouring more than $3 billion into development projects. That's a huge commitment, and it's not going anywhere. Think about it. India helped build the Afghan parliament building. India's also been responsible for building roads, bridges, and dams across Afghanistan, projects that are fundamental for the country's long-term infrastructure. And beyond that, India has also provided scholarships for Afghan students to study in India. This kind of support is essential for building a future that doesn't rely on aid alone. And it's not just about aid or infrastructure. One of the most interesting pieces of this puzzle is the Chabahar port. Now this might sound like a small thing, but it's not. India has been working with Iran to develop the Chabahar port, and it could become a critical link for Afghanistan, giving the country access to global markets through the Persian Gulf, bypassing Pakistan. This is huge for trade and connectivity, not just for India, but for the whole region. Okay, let's lighten things up a bit and talk about something a little more fun: cricket. Yes, cricket. It's not just about politics and foreign policy, it's about people too. And cricket has been a big part of India-Afghanistan relations for years. Afghanistan's cricket team has trained in India, and Indian fans have shown huge support for Afghan cricketers. Cricket has a way of breaking down barriers. It's a shared passion between the two nations, and it's something that really helps keep the people-to-people connection strong, even when the political relationship is a bit rocky. And beyond cricket, India is looking to strengthen cultural ties even more, with plans for more cultural exchanges, academic scholarships, and collaboration in the arts. This is where the long-term foundation of their relationship lies beyond governments and leaders. It's about building lasting connections between the people. So as we wrap up, India's shift in policy towards Afghanistan is definitely a big step, but it's also a cautious one. Humanitarian aid, infrastructure, and even cricket diplomacy are all part of a broader strategy to stabilize the region. But of course, security remains a major concern. The real test for India will be how it balances its humanitarian efforts with the ever-present threat of terrorism and regional instability. Here's a question for you. Do you think India should continue engaging with the Taliban, even with all the security concerns? Or do you think India should take a more hardline stance? Let us know in the comments below. Your thoughts matter. And hey, if you enjoyed today's breakdown, don't forget to hit like, share this video with your friends, and of course, subscribe for more insightful content. Thanks for tuning in to the Daily Past. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep exploring the world with us.